All right, so to start off, everyone is gonna need to do a bunch of slabs. So if you haven't done a slab at home, I'll do one, but let's see. I'll do one, but I don't want you to have to watch me roll out slabs for 20 minutes, so I rolled out some ahead of time also. So I have 2 even dowels and my rolling pin, and I'm just gonna start rolling a little at a time. Make sure you don't do it right on a sticky table surface because your slab will get stuck. And I pick mine up and flip it over a few times just so it doesn't bunch up weird in certain areas. And you'll need enough slab to make, so I made templates that are 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches for the square, and then you'll also need triangles. So it's an equilateral triangle that's 3.5 inches, 3.5 inches, 3.5 inches as well. So you can make your template however you want, whatever size, but just make sure that all the sides of the triangle line up with your square. So 3.5 inches is what I use. I think it'll be a pretty good size. And then you need 4 triangles and 3 squares. But let me tell you, the trickiest part about this is getting the angles that you cut on the sides correct. So I would highly recommend making a few extra of each. And when you cut them out, I lay my template down and then put a ruler on the edge as a guide. And then a needle tool is usually the best tool to cut slabs with. So like I said, I'm making 3 squares, ouch, and 4 triangles. And in order to get the hexagon shape that we're going for, you have to shoot for a 30-degree angle, which sounds really precise. We have at the studio this tool that has different angles on it. They're called like bevelers. You can buy them online and they have different angles that you can cut slabs with. But I was able to do it by hand just by using my blade and lining up the slab on the edge of the table. And a 30-degree angle is really not very aggressive. When it's finished, it almost looks like it's straight, but it's just a slight angle so that when I attach the slabs, they flare outward a tiny bit. So on the triangles, you'll want to do, your base is going to be a triangle, so you'll want to cut a 30-degree angle on all 3 sides, but then all the other pieces, you'll cut a 30-degree angle only on 2 of the sides on the triangle and 3 on the square. If that sounded confusing, let me show you what I mean. Okay, so I did this. This is what you'll want to end up with after you cut out all your slabs. So the angles that you'll want are 30 degrees here and here on the triangles, and then in a U shape on the squares, and on the bottom on all 3 sides. And then you spend the rest of the time assembling, which I made these yesterday so that they would dry to leather hard. Once you cut out all of your slabs that are still plastic, I left them overnight lightly wrapped until they were firm enough so that they could hold their shape a little bit better as I was assembling, because I anticipated that it was going to be a little bit tricky. All right, so now I'm going to start assembling. The way that I think it'll be best is to do a square first. So I'll do all my scratching. All right, so I'm scratching and slipping. If you're totally new to clay, when you're attaching pieces together, you'll want to scratch up the surface with either this, I have this tool to make it go a little faster, but if you're using a needle tool, you can just do some cross hatching on the sides, and it will have the same effect. It just takes longer. And then we'll start attaching. So this is slip. If you're making slip at home, you can take little bits of dried up clay. So even you can use your scraps from cutting your slabs if you don't have any slip. Put a hair dryer over them to make them totally bone dry and break them up into tiny pieces. And if you put them in a tiny Tupperware like this with some water and stir it up, it will turn into like this mud stuff if you don't have any made yet. And with something like this where I let the slabs dry out till they're hard before I started attaching, I was pretty generous with my slip because both sides of the piece are leather hard. And I'm gonna attach the square first, so you'll see it kind of sits out at an angle like this. Firmly press it in. And then my first triangle should sit up against the edge. I saw a lot of people that made wood bowls this way, so Ned, you could make a wood version. Alright, and I haven't scratched and slipped these squares yet, but I'm just lining it up there so that I make sure that it all fits together. So if your angles are a little bit off and you have some gaps in the middle, mine are pretty good, but you can always use a little bit of clay, soft clay, and slip and fill in the gaps with small coils. But since mine are lined up pretty well, I'm just going to use a paintbrush to smooth over these angles. And then on the outside, I'll use my metal rib to seal things over. All right, and last thing, the top is a little bit, like if my slabs are even ever so slightly different heights or not perfectly precise, they'll kind of stick up a tiny bit in different areas. If you have one of these tools at home, this is like what I use. It's a rasp. It's what I always use when I'm hand building to kind of smooth over the top and do leveling, because it'll take off clay a little at a time. But you can also use an X-Acto knife or just your sponge to kind of smooth things over. I tend to like to use it to create kind of a tapered edge on hand-built pieces so that it's not so boxy on the top. But in general, I think that went pretty well.